Welcome to the Business Buyer Diaries. My name is Nathan Platter. I'm a full-time employee, and I bought a business. I did everything right, from finding the deal, handling all the due diligence on 63 opportunities, and ultimately bought a profitable gym. And boy, was I in for a big surprise as a new owner. I chronicled everything in real time, including the biggest wins to the stressful nights at 2 a.m. I'm sharing my journey without sugarcoating anything, so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. Here's today's episode. So, kind of a small world. A random guy called my studio and said, like, hey, want to talk to the owner, Nathan? I'm thinking about buying a business in the same franchise. So, like, cool, let's do it. Caught up with the guy. The long story short, he's under due diligence with the other location, the one that I ended up backing out of. And it's fascinating. He's a well more financed buyer. So very strong in it, but still like a tech person. That has like the same background that I do, and we're both kind of the same like investor mindset and less than a like personal trainer mindset. It's just, we're talking about things to keep an eye on, how to handle due diligence. Something I told him that kind of fit me in the butt is, my general managers at W-2, my managers at W-2. So like my payroll is legitimately higher than what the prior guy said it was. They said like, oh no, my studio won't have that issue. I only have one employee. So I asked the buyer, like, what do you mean? Like, you have instructors, you have shift leads and stuff. Like, what do you mean you have one employee? He said, oh, no. So even though like they're given their hours and they're told how to do their work and they show up to perform work at the studio, if they don't show up, that's their decision. And so I'm not telling them their work schedule. And so, no, the current seller is just handling them as a contractor. And that is a red flag. If Uber drivers are being challenged as employees of Uber, and you're telling your club or your shift lead manager, like, hey, here are your hours, here's your pay rate, you have to show up and work in person, and here's how to do your work and the process, and here's the equipment you use that I provide for you, and you give them everything, and you're classifying them as a contractor, what that basically means is, as an employee, you are now responsible for your own income taxes, and the employer is trying to skirt out of their responsibilities as an employer, and they're playing wage law games, which I told the buyer, and this is all run through my head because this is the same kind of mess that I've been realizing the seller did with my studio, and now the seller is doing that to the other studio. And so instead of saying, hey, we're actively exploring like how to figure out what the heck is going on, because that's illegal. Like the IRS is going to come after you for that. And stuff is going to go down if you do that. So all that is like a half-second realization in my head. So I told the buyer, like, are you sure that's how they're doing it? He said, yeah. The seller is very black and white on that. He said, hey, get that in writing. This is a big thing to make sure you know of, like how it all works. If it's one thing if you think the seller's doing it wrong, like you don't have to do it the same way. But if you're buying the business and those are the assumptions, expenses are artificially lower than reality. So the value is going to be higher. You're going to pay for a high valuation, which means you're going to be overpaying. But then also, if you want to be legal, ethical, and moral, you're going to be classifying these folks as a W-2 employee because I'm getting to know this guy. That's how he's going to do it. And now his expenses are higher. It'll be hard to afford the loan and the business statement. And so now, to be moral and ethical, he will lose money. And that's not the way you're supposed to buy a business. If you buy a business and you're going to run it correctly, you need to be profitable. And so told the buyer, like, hey, I would double check with an attorney, an HR person, like if what the seller is doing is legal, ethical, moral. And if they're not, like you should report them. Like they need to get reported to the authorities here. But if you're not going to be up for that, that's your call. But know what you're stepping into. If one person's in a mud pit and you step into a mud pit, as long as you're both fine being in a mud pit, then you're not having an issue. But if one person's in a mud pit and you're not going to operate in a mud pit, then you need to get compensated for working in a mud pit to come back to apple comparison. So all of that to say, I think the buyer's going to proceed. The seller's going to play legal games and they're going to roll the dice on if they get caught and have to pay fines and do community service time. And then back and forth. Do I submit them do I report this as an anonymous tip? Do I do nothing? at the end of the day, it's not my dog to fight. Things have a way of coming back around and getting people. And if the seller has been conducting wage theft over the past year, 2, 3, I don't know how long. I don't know if they've been doing this their whole life or just with this one business or their other holdings that they've done. But things have a way of coming back to bite people. And it's not my place in this circumstance to do that. So I just gave strong heed to the buyer, hey, if you're going to explore this, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, because this is something that is hard to unwind if you're going to play at an honorable level in the business. So conversation went well. He's exploring that option and another option. Seems like a valid, good dude. He'll do fine. But man, going forward, when I coach and work with people, I'm going to have them deep dive into payroll, because that's not just a business expense. That's a legal liability. If you're wrong, that's one thing. If you don't pay your business insurance, you can buy a policy back. That's fine. If you're playing with HR, housing, credit, anything that the state or federal authorities will want to know about and get involved with, you are signing up for their headaches and hassles if you're going to run the same way. So that's where things are at. That's what I'm learning about all this, is to ask the hard questions, both to the owners as well as what am I getting myself into? Because you don't know. And you need to ask those questions. You need to have your own personal ethics involved. So we'll see what ends up happening. Apparently there's some news with the franchise coming out later today. I'm on pins and needles as to what that means. I'm catching up with the owner of the franchise tomorrow, depending on what the news is today. At the end of the day, we're going to run our playbook. I'm meeting my sales rep tomorrow that's replacing my current OG sales rep, and their guarantee or their goal is to do 1,200 in net revenue over the first 2 weeks. So, all right, let's do that. Let's have some solid stuff. So that's all right. That's where we're going. Let's rock and roll. This has been another episode of the Business Buyer Diaries. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I hope you're realizing that business ownership is no cakewalk. Check the podcast notes for a link to the DIY due diligence program, the complete list of show sponsors, and for media inquiries. Music written and composed by Wes Schrock. I'm your host, Nathan Platter. Join me again on the next one.